Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Michael Singletary. With a lifetime of experience as a serial entrepreneur, Michael has successfully built and exited multiple multi-million-dollar ventures. He began his real estate journey in 2013 and has since closed over 500 single-family transactions while raising over $10 million in private capital to fund his renovation and new construction projects. With the ability to source great data in 2019, Michael launched SkipForce to provide real estate professionals with access to this valuable resource at wholesale prices. In just 3 short years, SkipForce has grown to serve over 1,000 customers. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
What's going on, Kendall? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. We run in a lot of similar circles, and so we
Yeah.
finally get a chance to sit down and talk shop a little bit. So thank you for joining us. For those that may not be super familiar with your background, can you just start off with how did you get into real estate and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a funny story. I'm 55 years old, so I'm a little bit on the older side, right? So I started real estate when I was 45, and I knew nothing. Before that, I used to own high-end hair salons in Houston, Texas, and I remember going to RIAs and stuff like that, and thinking, man, this is way over my head. And I always say this, like a lot can happen in 10 years. If you would have told me 10 years ago, put a gun in my head and go, hey, what's skip tracing or anything like that, I would say, just shoot me. There's no way I could answer that question. And I wound up owning a data company, which is really ironic because I could barely log in. We have a team of developers, probably about 6 or 7 developers. I have to literally hire somebody to translate because I don't know what they're talking about half the time. But it's just intention, right? I got into real estate because at that time, the salons, I'm a systems and process guy. So the salons were running itself. It really required probably about 10, 15 hours a month out of me. It's still going. I sold it to actually my very first assistant. They're doing well. And I was just like, hey, I just wanted to get into something else. And I was like, just like everybody else, you thinking your avenue is going to be real estate, right? And also thinking that it's going to happen much quicker than it actually does happen. And it isn't as difficult as it actually is to be really successful in this industry. So if you really knew, how hard things were before you step into any venture, I think that most people will never do it. And I think that's the ignorance is bliss thing. And now 10 years later, I'm engrossed in real estate. We still buy houses, but we buy mostly land now. Love land. We did that transition about 3 or 4 years ago. Opened a data company like 4 years ago, and now we're about to start another platform. And super excited every day. It's just like another adventure, and it's a lot of fun.
I love that. So many things about that story I love. Transitioning from a completely different niche into real estate. I love that you got started at what you said was a little bit of an older age, but if you have the drive, there's no age that you can't be too young, you can't be too old to start this. So I absolutely love that. Now, you mentioned that you got started doing single family houses. How did you transition into land? What was that? What brought that about?
I wanted to do bigger deals, but I didn't want to get into the multifamily space. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Matter of fact, I live in Austin as well, right? And we used to build new construction here in Austin. We used to do flips, quite a bit of them. And there are 7-figure flips, right? Big flips. And I just saw the handwriting on the wall that what has happened the last year or two was going to happen. I got out a little bit early. I lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question real quick?
How did you get into land?
The land was I wanted to do bigger deals and I wanted to start with the infill stuff. And now we're starting to go into more acreages. And I always knew that land was a place that I could do it completely virtually. And that's part of my story as well, because when I first got into real estate, I was going to apartments, I was going to all that stuff, and I didn't really like it. I wanted to go 100% virtual when they made that transition with houses about 5 years ago. And I thought land would be an easier vehicle to maintain that type of lifestyle.
Love it. And has it been easier?
Yes, some it has. You learn on your way going through your journey, but I think it's a lot easier because you don't have to deal with obviously the renovations and all the other components of houses as everybody else knows. For me, it's just finding the right area and not trusting too much in what the realtor says. I made that mistake quite a bit, right? Like you use them, they're a valuable asset to your team and they're valuable information. But I think when I first started getting the land, if there was any tip that I could go back and tell myself was that, hey, listen, just take what the realtor say with a grain of salt. Obviously, you got to do your own research, and that way you don't get stuck holding some land for longer than you want.
Yeah. Calling all ambitious land flippers. Ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse. Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, can you give us a 30,000-foot view of your land business in terms of you started with infill lots, and then what was your business model like? Were you traditionally closing and then turning around and flipping? Were you doing some wholesaling? What did that look like?
We do mostly, ironically, it's the same thing with houses. We closed almost everything and then we turn around and flipped it, right? We do whatever needs to be done and sell at not at the highest, but about 90%. Now we're doing more wholesales. We're looking for bigger acreages. We just closed one in about an hour outside of Austin for 25 acres. And that's a sweet deal. We got it for 8,000 an acre. We'll probably sell it for about 14, something like that. So we're looking for more deals like that, deals that we can subdivide as well. But I wanted to always start small and build my way up.
Love it. So, how did you find yourself in this data world? How did that come to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like most entrepreneurs, you always try to find a cheaper way of doing things. And so when I first started, we were doing a lot of direct mail, probably about 25,000 pieces a month. And then cold calling wasn't really on my radar, and I was introduced to that. And so I dove headfirst. And this is probably the beginning of texting. And so we were one of the very first ones in our area to text. We were, in the beta of a lot of the big texting platforms and stuff like that. And at that time, skip tracing and property data was unbelievably expensive. It was like 15, 18 cents. It was pretty normal. And so just looking like, hey, listen, where are they getting their data? How are they doing? They're selling it to me. I know they're resellers. And so just with more digging, I found a data set that nobody else had. And so I was super excited about that. But like with most data, and it still applies no matter what anybody says, it costs money, and to get it for cheaper, you have to buy and commit to a much higher volume. So we knew the data was great. We knew it wasn't the same as everybody else's. So we're like, maybe we could sell this. And so we started selling it to people that are in our masterminds and stuff like that. But we made a lot of mistakes, Kendall. We didn't know anything about selling data, much less creating the platform, making the user journey easy and seamless. And that really was a big learning curve. And so we got through that, and the data is great. And at that time, we were the cheapest on the block, right? Which kind of hurt us because I came out thinking I'm going to undercut everybody. And of course, everybody assimilates cheap price with inferior quality. And now, ironically, as things have evolved, data is becoming cheaper and cheaper. It's almost a race to the bottom. And we could talk about that as well. But the question is, I'm always trying to find the gap and how can I improve it? And so that's how I got into data. And then I just love customer service. I loved it whenever I was in the hair industry. I love the SaaS component. And so when I got a little bit of taste of that, I was all in.
Love that. You mentioned that when you came across this data set, you realized this is really quality data. So for people that are not in the data world, they just know I need data for my business. How did you figure out that this was high quality? What were some of the flags that set that off for you to say, okay, this is really good quality data?
I think at the beginning, you really don't know until you just try it. So at that point, we were running quite a bit, and you could tell pretty quickly if you're staying on top of your KPIs, if the data was great or not. And truthfully, it's not just the data, but how you aggregate and formulate the data as well, because sometimes you can make a mistake and it just throws things off, right? So how you figure things out is like you use it, but you monitor the KPIs extremely closely. And there's benchmarks on all your KPIs, and you'll know pretty quickly if the data is good or not. The problem is most people don't monitor the KPIs, and they won't know until 2, 3, 4 weeks in that, hey, it's a data problem, and it just kills your pipeline.
So what are some of the most important KPIs that tell the story about whether or not your data set is good or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because the KPI that people always throw out is hit rate when it comes to skip tracing. And it's always got a high hit rate. And if you guys don't know what a hit rate means, it means if you submit a list of 1,000, you get 900 back. It's a 90% hit rate. But truthfully, that is a terrible KPI because they could give you any number and it's a higher hit rate. You want to monitor is RPC, right person contact. So the most important thing as a provider is that is the data correct? And when you're cold calling, really the most important thing you're trying to do during that process is figuring out, am I talking to the right person? You know what I mean? And so very few people will track that. They'll just go on, hey, I got some deals out of it, I got some leads out of it. But really, ultimately is, are they the person? If they're the right person to talk to, is that the right person contact, and is that the right percentage? Then you have a really great quality data.
So what is the right percentage? Where do you like to see that as a minimum?
Yeah, so on it's such an inexact science. That's the thing about skip tracing. It's like the weatherman, right? You're 50% wrong most of the time. You know what I mean? And so it's really a tier level thing. So if you're cold calling, you want to keep track of your connection ratio. Okay, so how often are you connecting with a live person? And that needs to be around 50 to 60% of the time. And sometimes you would be surprised that it's a lot lower than that. And there's a couple of reasons why. Out of that, though, you should be around 80% right person contact. So when you hear people go, hey, my skip tracing is 80% accurate, that's not right. That's not true, right? So out of 1,000, they're not getting 800 accurate phone numbers. They're getting 400 accurate phone numbers. They're the accuracy of the actual connection, right? So that was been my biggest kind of catalyst of our new platform. Like 50% of our data is wrong. And most of the time, what do you do with that data? You just throw it away.
Throw it away. Yeah.
Exactly. Get more data. And truthfully, that's the data you should be mining and going after because that's the harder to find person. So we have built this new called Lead Pros where you're going to be able to track everything in real time, like it's connected to the dialer. So every record will have a disposition. And then you could take all we call it performing and non-performing. You can take all the non-performing numbers, run it through another skip tracing provider because that's super important. Everybody thinks that everybody has the same database, but it doesn't. I could find 20% of numbers that IDI cannot find, and IDI could find 20% that I can't. So you're trying to extract a little bit more. And so we built this platform. We could do it with a push of a button. And then you want to nail the non-performing numbers. If you really want to maximize your data set, that's the sequence you want to go through. Either you want to go to cold calling, another skip tracing provider, texting, mail, or you could actually move it all around. And it's really cool because our platform, which there's a format of it right behind us, you can literally create your sequence. If I put a list of 10,000 in, it'll go through the sequence on its own with certain triggers, but that you put in place. So it's unbelievably important to do that because you're really maximizing your spend.
Yeah, that's really cool. So talk to me a little bit about when you say that there are different data providers, why isn't all data created equal? Like why is that the case? Like why is some data better than others? Can you give us a 30,000-foot view of that?
I don't know if the unequal part is when somebody sells older data. A big trend that you're seeing right now is skip tracing is included. It's free, essentially, right? And nothing's for free. Everything costs money. There's absolutely nothing that's free. And so what you'll see on that is that the better data company provides the freshest data because you got to understand who's our avatar, who are we targeting? Are you the only person calling them? Are we the only industry calling them? They are being bombarded by phone calls and they're changing their phone numbers, I mean, on a consistent basis, right? So the provider that constantly refreshes their repository, that's the one that's always going to give you a better data set.
That's a really good point. Okay, so now that we have this context around the data,
Yep.
let's talk a little bit about cold calling and how you use cold calling in your land business, and what are some of the most important keys to success when setting up a cold calling program for your business?
Yeah, so unbelievably important because most people don't do this right. So it's just the acronyms ADD, right? Agent, data, dialer. It's like the three pillars of cold calling. And you got to nail all three of them, or those KPIs that we talked about, it's not going to happen, right? And you're also going to probably get filled with a bunch of junk leads. We'll start with the agent. You got to train them, and you can't just give them a script and throw them on a dialer. That's just not the way you do it, especially in land. Land is actually hard. It's easier to purchase, but it's harder to have a conversation, right? Because there's no
Why,
motivation.
say again, why is that?
Because there's no real motivation.
Mm. Okay.
Right? There's
So
no emotional attachment to the piece of land mostly. It's just that I got this thing, I don't want it anymore. It's one of those things, or I have it and I don't want to sell it at a discount, I'll keep it forever, whatever. But the thing is, the agent has to have number one, great English. So you have to give them a English test. They have to have a C1 or C2 classification. That is the highest classification, C2. So that's the first thing you have to nail. Then you have to nail their personality profile. And then after that, you have to put them through extensive training. Like in ours, we do not allow them to have a script. We train them through pillars, right? So as long as we're covering these pillars within the conversation, that's the most important part because we want them to have active listening skills. They want match tonality, right? A lot of landowners are people, they're rural, right? So and they want to have a regular conversation. They also want you to get to the point pretty quickly with that. So you want to be able to build the rapport relatively quickly and hit the pillars. Our most important pillar is timeline. Like I want to know if you want to sell this piece of land within the next 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, something like that, right? Immediate future, immediate future. Otherwise, it's you're trying to get their motivation, why you're trying to sell, hey, what kind of price, the same stuff, but not in a script format. Because there's nothing that'll kill a sales call more than asking a question that they've already answered, right? It'll just absolutely kill it. And so, especially with land is super, it's you have to be more direct. You have to understand what questions to ask and the right timing and the right tonality because they could care less, right? They don't have any emotional attachment to that house or to that, yeah, to that property.
imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Only Land Fan School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources, the on market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, Only Land Fan School has you covered with step by step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join Only Land Fan School at olfschool.com today. Yeah, that's really good. So that covers the first A. What about the other two D's?
Yeah, so the data piece we talked about before, you have to make sure the data is great. If the data is not great, you're sunken for about 3 to 4 months. I'm sorry, 3 to 4 weeks. Then the dialer is unbelievably important, and most people don't know how to navigate, right? So they think they're just open up an account, put a list in, start dialing, and it's unbelievably unproductive. We use Ready Mode. I don't know if you're familiar with Ready Mode, but it has like a 1990s interface. It's not user friendly. It takes us about 30 to 45 minutes to set up an account appropriately. We probably know that dialer better than their reps. I know we do actually. We use all of them, and their Ready Mode gives the best performance without being like a very top tier dialer, like a 5.9 or something like that. We are paying a lot more for it. You just have to stay on top of it. You have to monitor it every single hour. Like you have to sit there and say, how long is the agent's avail time? That's how long are they talking from one call to the next, right? How many are, and what's their connection like? Sometimes you're only running maybe 3 or 4 lines. Sometimes you have to dial it up to 10 or 12 lines. And you're constantly monitoring it the whole time. So you have to have somebody on top of that. You have to have somebody also listening to the calls for the agents to help them. Because the only way that they're going to improve is if you catch them as quickly as possible when they make a mistake. And then you drill with them. And it just, that's the reason why people go, hey, listen, cold calling doesn't work. It works great. Your cost per leads are lower. Your cost per contracts are lower. Your sales cycle is a little bit longer. There's no doubt about that. But you always got to give up something because your cost per contract for direct mail and PPC are triple, quad, even, right? 4 or 5x higher than cold calling.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the national average on what is the cost per deal when it relates to cold calling right now? What are you seeing?
It's typically under 2,000. It really depends on the sale. It's really has everything to do with the salesmanship of it, on who's taking that lead. Like one person, it might cost them 4,000, and another person cost them less than 1,000. It depends on that person that's actually taking the lead, their ability to underwrite it relatively quickly and figure out a way to monetize it. But it's usually under 2,000.
That's really good. That's really good. We talked about some of the most important keys in a cold calling campaign. What are some of the most common pitfalls other investors falling into when it comes to cold calling?
You're lazy, man. They want the deal to fall in their lap. They think that if they don't get a deal right away, it doesn't work. Cold calling is a pipeline play. And it's you have to understand what it is, right? You're disrupting somebody. They don't know you and they don't like you. And that's the way you have to think about it whenever you're having that conversation at the beginning. And they're never going to tell you the truth. So that's number one. You're never going to get the bottom line on the first call. You got to have the mentality that we are working. It's like a farmer. We're working, we're planting the seed, and we're going to nurture it and we're going to grow it. And you build a relationship, and it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of salesmanship. With land, it's a little bit easier, truthfully, than for houses. That's the reason why I think a lot of house guys are flooding into the land market because they feel like it's either easier. But as you and I will know, it's not easy. I don't know if it's the right word, but
It might be simpler, but
it's
not
simpler.
easier,
That's
right?
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So unrealistic expectations, they don't follow up nearly enough. Like they don't like we buy how like everything that we buy right now was a lead that came in. I would say not everything, 70% was a lead that came in 6 months ago. There's some that came in 12 months ago. But once you get that pipeline going and you're nurturing it and you have lead managers, the lead managers is the backbone of the company, right? So they're the ones that's nurturing and you jump in every once in a while and stuff like that. And you're providing value to them. And so and that is how you get more deals. It starts having momentum just like anything else. But truthfully, every campaign is 6 months. Direct mail is 6 months. You might have that lead that comes in that will sell right now. You'll have more of those. But to have to truly get the most out of a direct mail campaign, it's 4 to 6 months, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now you mentioned follow-up. Talk to us about what is, if someone is, listen, I'm terrible at follow-up. We see this a lot. At least I've seen this a lot. There are a lot of people out there that they're like, hey, I didn't get the call. I didn't get the deal on the first call or maybe the second call, and they're not interested. But you're saying that sometimes it takes 6 to 12 months to nurture these leads. So if someone is listening to this and they know that follow-up is a really important area of growth for them, what advice would you give them in terms of how to set up a follow-up sequence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one, auto drip doesn't work. So forget about that. If you think that you could just set it on an auto drip and you text them and they'll be like, okay, I'll sell you this piece of land at 50%, it's just not going to happen. If you don't want to do it, then you need to outsource it. If you don't want to make the phone calls and you have the budget, outsource it. Have a person talk to them because our avatar, anybody that wants to sell an asset at 50%, something's happening in their life. And a lot of times it has to do with timing. You're in front of them at the right time. Or you made an impression on them to go, hey, listen, we've had plenty of these. I really like you, Mike. I really like your team. And I wanted to call, you're the first person I thought of because you were kind enough to talk to me and give me all this information, whatever the case is. That is the beauty of cold calling that people miss, that you have the ability to create the relationship before they're ready to sell. So it's a huge follow-up game. And if you can't do it, you have to have somebody else do it.
So what would be like a bare minimum for the best results when it comes to follow-up? Are we talking about you need to be following up with these people a live call once a month, once every 2 weeks? How aggressive are you with that?
Yeah, so all leads aren't created equal, right? Some people require me to call them every week or every other week. Some people require me to call once a quarter. I usually don't like to go beyond 30 days if there's any motivation because things change all the time. But usually I try to stay around that 30 day, but there's just some where this person's not going to sell it in a year or 2 years or whatever the case is, but there's something here. And I just want to stay in front of them. I don't want to bug them by calling them every 3 or 4 weeks when that's the outcome. So it's not all leads are created equal. You're going to have to really classify your leads, hot, warm, cold statuses, and really stay on top of it. And here's a mistake that so many people make. A lot of my students make this too. They'll go in with a mindset, with a predisposition of this lead is not going to sell to me because they told the agent X and I needed at Y. And I'm like, what are we talking about here? Just because they told one person one thing doesn't mean that they're not going to tell you something else. Matter of fact, they might talk to 5 different people and tell them 5 different things. So you got to get in there and talk to people and create the relationship and not. I think that's a big mindset thing also. Well, don't have this preconceived notion that this person's not going to sell to you because of this. And sometimes I even tell my AMs, don't even listen to the call, right? Or be very careful with the notes. Just be very careful. Go in there with the attitude like, hey, I already come in with advantage. I know what's going on, but I'm fishing for any inconsistencies in their story.
Yeah, that is huge. That I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that they look at what that first agent writes down and the person says, "Oh, I want $1 million for this property and it's only worth like 50K." And they're like, "This person's not interested in selling," but they said they wanted a call back. And so
Yeah.
it's like, okay, there's some motivation there. There's at least some interest, right? So I think that's a really good point. Mike, can you talk a little bit about drilling down into what do those follow-up calls look like? Are you calling, let's say that you're calling someone regularly every 30 days. Are you calling saying, "Hey, are you interested in selling?" No? Okay, bye. What does it look like? How do you train your team to make those calls and what should happen on those calls?
We want to speak human. That's the first thing I always tell our team, right? Like we want to speak human and take really great notes on what's going on in their life and then bring that up in another conversation, right? Catch you, hey, listen, hey, Kendall, we just talked 30 days ago. Catch me up to speed. And it wasn't you. Last time we talked, you were having some issues with your dog, right? How's everything going with that? You want to speak human with them as much as possible and then just let the conversation go and just be quiet.
Excellent. So you're not leading with did you want to sell? Anything changed?
That's a low status question. It puts you in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Because then they say no and the conversation's over, right? So if you lead with that, it just puts you in a position where you can't work your way out of. And the conversation's done, and you didn't do the number one thing that you should be doing, which is moving that sale a little bit further down the pipeline. Like every single call, yes, you want to make a deal, but really your focus, like, I need to learn something new about this person and what their real problem is. And when you position it like that, the call's over, it's done.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, if someone's listening to this and they're like, it would feel really weird for me to just call a random person that I've talked to 30 days ago about selling their property. They said they're not interested right now, and I just call and don't talk. What do I say? How do you coach those people?
You want to end the conversation with that setup. Go, hey, listen, I know you said you're not willing to sell right now. I don't want to bother you, but do you mind if I just follow up with you in 30 days? They'll tell you. They will tell you, don't call me in 30 days. Call me in a year or call me
Mhm.
6 months. I never would go that long, but they will tell you. But more times than not, if you have created a relationship, man, they don't mind. Yeah, absolutely, mind. Give me a call.
Excellent. And that first, let's say the opening, I think that's what I see most people afraid of on those follow-up calls is the opening. How do you start the conversation? Hey, just checking in on you. How do you like to approach that?
It depends. Every call is a little bit different, and it really comes down to the notes, right? Like I'm scanning the notes real quick just to see because we'll have something in our CRM called COGS. And essentially what that means is that what is the biggest bullet point of this deal? What's the newest thing that I learned about this deal? So that I'll come in, I'll bring that up. But I try to just be as human as possible. And I always have the tonality like I'm talking to my neighbor or I'm calling, hey, Kendall, what's going on? You know what I mean? I just have a normal tone. I don't want to be too high pitched. I don't want to be too salesy or anything like that. And more times than not, they remember who I am, and I'll just come right into, hey, last time we talked, you were going through X, Y, and Z. They're like, oh yeah, I can't remember. I can't believe you remembered. Boom, credibility on report.
Yeah, that's really excellent. Now, one of the other common occurrences that people have come across, especially when nurturing these leads, is the phenomenon of ghosting, right? They've talked to the lead said they're interested, and then they can never get them back on the phone.
Yeah.
How do you go about mitigating that and overcoming that?
I don't know that you could ever eradicate it. Because re-engagement is a problem. It's a problem when the lead first comes in. That's why you got to be super aggressive that first week. I always have a saying, if you don't feel like you're stalking them a little bit, you're probably not following up enough that first week. And then after that, it really depends, right? I try to always preface things like, hey, listen, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to bug you. I don't want to chase you. The last thing I want to do is any of that. When I call back, can you just obviously put my phone in there? If you don't want to talk to me, can you just tell me, text me? Right? I don't want to have to call you because I'll always blame my boss. My boss will make me do this. I don't want to do that. Right? So I give them the opportunity to tell me no.
Hey there, Land fans. If you're enjoying this episode and would like to see more episodes like this, please be sure to let us know by liking and subscribing below.
So yeah.
That's really good. I love that. So, when people are considering, should I do cold calling? Should I do mail? Should I do texting? What are some of the things that you look at and analyze in terms of what's best for this particular investor's business?
You got to figure out what your budget look like. How much what your marketing look like for the next 6 months? So that's always the first question I have. What are your goals? And then, okay, what's your budget? And more times than not, they're not aligned. I want to close 5 deals a month. How much do you want to spend a month in advertising? I got $1,000. That's not going to work, right? At least not for a long period of time, not on a consistent basis. So how I always want to structure it is like, how much money can you commit to advertising for 6 months? And even if you don't get a deal, you're not going to sweat it. You're not going to just cut it off. You're not going to. So we'll start from that place. Once we get to that, okay, if you have a bigger budget, 10,000, you have more options. If you have a smaller budget, 2, 3,000, you're probably going to have to start with texting and cold calling. You're probably going to have to do it yourself at the beginning until you start getting a little bit of momentum, right? And then we build the framework around it. Cold calling and texting are going to be the cheapest. So you use that at the beginning, and then you layer it with direct mail, especially the way that we are building this platform where you're not direct mailing 20,000, you only have to direct mail 10,000, right? And it just really has to fit within your budget and consistency.
Yeah, I really love that you bring up the 6 months because I've seen a lot of people say, "Hey, I've done the marketing for 1 or 2 months. It's not working. I'm going to need to change markets. I'm going to need to change marketing channels." So, talk a little bit more about why 6 months and why is that important?
It's just the nature of how marketing is. I've done all of it, right? I've done PPC, every single thing. When you're hopping around, it's really hard to get traction, and really you're never going to be great at anything. You really need to find one, possibly two. I usually just say one medium, be a master at it, and then layer other, campaigns on top, right? We have some people that say you got to use 5 different channels. That's not until you're at that level. Because I got to tell you, there is nothing worse. You think not having leads is bad. What's even worse is when you spend a lot of money, get too many leads, and you don't have the ability to handle them. You're just burning money, right? That's a big part of it too.
Yeah, that's really good insight. Now, I know when we were preparing for this conversation, something that you mentioned that you were really interested in talking about was how business owners in the real estate investment business can maximize their data ROI. So, can you talk a little bit about what are some specific data points should land investors focus on to maximize their ROI, especially when it comes to marketing and data and that type of thing?
You got to figure out who your avatar is. Who's my buyer? You always start with that, right? What is my area? Who is my buyer? And then you kind of work backwards as far as the data is concerned, right? What is my buy box? What do I feel could turn pretty quickly? I always suggest, like most people, to stay around your area until you feel really comfortable doing things virtual. But even with virtual, like we buy in Florida, we buy all over Texas, and it takes people, like it takes an infrastructure, like you have to have boots on the ground. You can't. I have made so many mistakes with this as far as just jumping in a little bit too quickly. But on the data front, it's just like anything else. What can you handle? And then expand it out from there. And then after that is monitoring the data. You got to monitor and keep track of everything. 90%, 99, I'm being real generous with 90%. I think it's going to be higher than that. Most people do not keep track of all their data. Like they only know about the leads that are coming in. That is the only thing they pay attention to. They don't pay attention to anything else, right? So how powerful would it be if you had something that could monitor every single record that comes into your business, right? And so, and that's what I'm talking about when we're filling the gaps. We wanted that for our business because we were constantly like taking spreadsheets, pulling them in, pulling out. And it was cumbersome and a pain, and there's a lot of cracks in it. So we wanted to more streamline. So stay on top of the data, make sure you find who your buyer is, focus on areas that you understand, and then just work your way out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, what systems do you recommend to use to be able to track and measure the effectiveness of your cold calling campaigns?
What systems? Every dialer could shoot out a KPI report, right? So it really all depends. So if you're outsourcing it, they should be sending it to you every day. Anyways, they should be sending you an end of day report with all the KPIs, end of week report, all that stuff, right? And then what you want to know on that is what's going on with the rest of the data. Are they giving that data to you as well? So that's super important because you're paying for it. And if you are giving that data to them, then you want to make sure that you're just like classifying it. But at the very beginning, you're probably going to have to be doing this on your own. Get everything out of the dialer. It'll tell you all the numbers and the dispositions and the statuses of the numbers and stuff like that. Put things on a spreadsheet and just follow it almost every single day to see what is inconsistent, right? Because if you're following it every day, like my connection ratio is really low, then I got to figure out, wait a minute, is this a data problem or is it a dialer problem? And if I figure out, okay, it's not a dialer problem, well, then it's a data problem. I got to stop everything and change it really quickly.
Mm.
Otherwise, you're gonna, most people don't even look at it. And they're 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, kills your momentum.
Yeah, so if someone's listening to this and they're brand new to the idea of a dialer, when you say it's a dialer problem, what would that look like and what does that mean?
What that will look is like not enough calls are actually connecting, right? There's just too much avail time. Typically, an agent can do about 600 to 800 calls a day. They're typically going to give you about 2 to 3 leads a day of people that want to sell. And then so you just got to monitor that. Once again, lost train of thought. Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, when you say that it's a dialer problem,
Yeah. Okay.
what does that mean? Like, how could the dialer be ineffective or wrong?
That's a great question because I'm not in the dialer as much. I have somebody that's in there. But the biggest one is just like I said, you want to make sure that the agents are connecting. Your connection ratios is high. And sometimes, depending on the day, depending how long they're talking, depending also on your cycling of phone numbers, here's a really great tip. It's called the IDS. So every single area code that you're calling should have about 50 phone numbers for an agent, right? Because each number is being flagged now at about 70 calls. And that could
Mm.
happen in 30, 40 minutes. So you need to figure out, is my connection ratio down? Are my phone numbers being flagged? Is the rotation correct as far as am I dialing enough for the agents to keep talking? Am I dialing too much where it's just burning through the data? Those are the biggest pillars when it comes to dollars.
That's really good. That's really good. Now, you were talking about the agent and how important it is to train the agent, not just throw a script at them. So,
Yeah.
whenever you're listening to your agent calls and you're doing these agent call reviews, what are some of the things that you're listening for? You mentioned tone. Do you have any other things that you're listening for in terms of reviewing these calls and making sure that your agent is doing the job that you want them to do?
Yeah. First, are we connecting with the person? Are we able to get through their first objection? Are we allowing them to hang up or too quickly? Are we engaging with them? Are we matching their tempo and their tone? Are we listening? Are we actually listening to what they're saying? So those are huge, right? Those are the biggest ones. And they could all be trained. It just takes effort, right? And but once you put in the effort, that's when you start really getting the results.
That's great. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I am convinced that I need to be doing cold calling. Maybe they were doing a different marketing channel before, and they're trying to weigh the pros and cons of do I hire out cold calling or do I try to hire my own and train my own cold call agent and have build out a cold calling department in my business? What are some things that you would encourage people to think about when they're trying to make that decision?
Yeah, it's just like anything else, man. You could outsource it. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you don't have to deal with the headache. You just want to figure out what's your business going to look like in 3 years. What do you want? Are you going to build out the infrastructure to do this right? Because if you're not, you're just going to burn money. You might as well just outsource it, right? But if you're like, hey, listen, I think it's worth it for me, then do it right. Make sure you hire the right person. Make sure you're spending plenty of time training them and make sure you're giving them enough to stay. That's a huge one, right? We don't have a lot of churn because we make sure that we take care of them. And they're just like they're people, right? They want to be engaged. They're doing an unbelievably tough job and they want to be a part of a team. You got to make it fun for them. You got to give them like games and it's what we call spiffs and who gets the first lead today gets an extra $5 or who gets the most leads today gets an extra 20. And you're constantly trying to make it fun for them so they could produce because they're doing an unbelievably hard job.
Yeah, a lot of rejection
A
in
lot all day, man. And
yeah.
you know what? And the training, we have weekly trainings with them, at least once a week, and then you pull them aside. That's huge too. Imagine if you're just sitting there making a phone call every single day and 90% of the people hate you, right?
Mm.
It's taxing. But truthfully, when you give them the proper training and the proper culture and stuff like that, they want to learn how to get through an objection. You'll do call audits and you're like, what did you think there? You should have said X, Y, and Z. And it gets to a point to where all the calls are the same. It's just a different personality, right? The answers are really the same on almost every single call to a certain degree. What you should say is almost the same, but it's really how am I going to deliver that to that personality on the other side of the phone?
Yeah, that's really good insight. Yeah, and I love the fact that you give very detailed feedback in call reviews to that person because I think that is a huge game changer versus go watch this module and learn how to be a better
Yeah,
call
I
agent.
did that too,
Right.
man. That's why I had to change because it was not. And I
Yeah.
was one of those, this doesn't work at the beginning. But then when I saw other people that are in my masterminds crushing it, why not me? What am I doing wrong? Instead of saying something else doesn't work, I think you got to take ownership in a lot of things. Everything works. Every single campaign works. Okay. It's just how do you want to set it up? Like for me, cold calling worked for me is because it fits my personality. I'm aggressive. I want to go get it. And also I want to dictate when I'm talking to that lead, because the one thing about inbound leads is that the lead is always a little bit better, little bit further along the sales cycle, but they always call the most inappropriate time. And you got to answer the phone. And man, and the thing with cold calling is I could dictate the timing of almost everything. So it's just a balance on what you want your life to look like, your work life to look like.
Yeah, that's really good. I've talked to several people about this specific topic, and a lot of people say the following statement. They say, mail is better because those people are motivated versus cold calling.
Okay.
So, what's your response to that?
Listen, yes, you have certain percentages of inbound leads that are ready to go quicker. Because, like I said before, remember, you are disrupting them. Absolutely, that's true. But a lead that somebody that wants to sell their house or wants to sell an asset right now and they have pain, it's really you. Are you a good enough salesman to get to the bottom of what they're trying not to tell you, essentially what it is? Yes, to sit there and go inbound leads or outbound leads are just as good as inbound leads, that's not true. It's not 100% true. It can be as good if you know how to work it, but it's a third of the cost. There's always things you have to weigh. And truthfully, not everybody that calls you from a cold call, from a mailing campaign is motivated to sell.
Absolutely.
And same
Yeah,
with PPC. Not everybody's willing to sell at a discount. They're willing to sell maybe. And sometimes with direct mail, if you did enough, a lot of people are calling you that are angry that they got a mail piece from you. So that's always a little bit trippy too. So yes, there's this balances on both of them.
yeah. So, what is your response to someone that says there's a difference between good leads and bad leads? Do you think that's accurate, or how do you
Uh,
approach that?
Depends. So if somebody that goes, yeah, I'll sell my house, give me $1 million for a $500,000 house, that's not a great lead. There's no pain. Like a lead is somebody that has motivation. I don't care if they're asking $1 million and it's a $500,000 house. If I know there's motivation there, that's a lead. Also, a lead to me is anybody that's asking below market. They're asking 80% of Zillow, that's a lead, right? So those two things are leads to me, right? And that comes in any campaign, truthfully.
Yeah. Mike, let me ask you because you mentioned that oftentimes, especially when you compare land leads to house leads, a lot of these land leads are not motivated or they are not motivated at the same level as you would see seller lead or house leads. Those they typically the motivation it manifests in a different way. So how do you go about mining to find where is that land leads motivation? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's great. So obviously it's going to be from the call disposition, what they're telling the agents, that's one, but also what lists are we pulling, right? And if they're in our platform and I can see that this land is on multiple lists, like there's a tax delinquency, he's an absentee, there might be bankruptcy attached to it, something like that. There's something's going on with this. And I need to pay, I don't care what they're telling me, I got to pay attention to this lead. I got to stay on top of it even more. So I think it's just paying attention and with land, it's so funny because it's so polarizing. It's either they want to sell right, they're like, yeah, give it time, go, let's go. Or they're like, no, that's just not going to work. You just got to be, it's harder to be personable with somebody when they have an asset that they're not attached to, if that makes sense, right? It's easier to build rapport on houses because they got something that they're really emotionally tied to, right? But with land, when there's zero emotion, there's a couple things. You're going to have to just go through a lot to get that person that's ready to sell in that moment, right? You got to work them, or you got to figure out, how am I monetizing this deal? This deal, I could pay full value, but if I could subdivide it, I could do so many different things, right? Entitlements, whatever the case is, how can I monetize this deal? And so the underwriting part of it is a big deal in for land investors. People just do not underwrite well enough.
Yeah, it's arguably harder, right? I've heard it said that the underwriting process for land is really the moat around the industry that keeps the haves out from the have-nots and vice versa, because it is difficult to comp land, especially if you're like in the middle of nowhere and there's no other comps out there. So it's not as straightforward, I should say. Maybe not as difficult, but maybe not as straightforward. That's a really good point. So can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned your platform earlier. Tell us a little bit more about this platform and give us some specifics.
Yeah, super excited about it. It's called Lead Pros. It's the format is behind this is where it's directly linked to the dialer through an API. So you'll know in real time what's going on with every single record. We're going to have also in the platform the ability to pick a direct mail piece, customize it completely if you want to by what the person's saying, and send those mail pieces. You can do one-offs. You can take a whole non-performing list and set that at one time. You can set the schedule on it. Then also, because it's all data points, right? You could receive returning data points like the AKAs or vacants or whatever the case is that goes into that particular file. And you can sit there and organize your data in a way that enables you to just create the best campaign for it that's going to give you the most ROI. And one of the good things about this one is like how we set it up, so like you don't have to like leave your CRM. This will bolt onto your CRM through Zapier, where there's some others where you have to use them the whole way or whatever the case is. So super excited about it because we're going to be able to diminish your ad spend, but increase your ROI, all at the same time that you are going to be able to be on top of your business like never before when it comes to data.
That's really cool. Yeah, my ears perked up when you mentioned about how you can see the different lists that these properties are on right there within the platform. Can you, if someone has, let's say, when you mentioned earlier how we have dozens and dozens, probably hundreds, if you've been in the game long enough, spreadsheets of data, will you be able to plug that into that platform, or what does that all look
Yeah,
like?
yeah, you plug it all in, it'll organize everything for you. It's a list organizer on steroids, right? One of the cool things that we're going to have on it will obviously our VA service will have full-time prospectors. We have full-time lead managers, so we can plug right into your system, and you could essentially do everything, do nothing, and have them doing most of the work, and you're just talking to sellers. So if you have the budget for that, great. But another thing that we're super excited about is that we're going to create a fractional piece to it as well, to where you'll have pull your list or follow up, something that's very small and fractional, clean up your data, whatever the case is, where you could hire us on a per minute basis. So somebody that's starting off, they go, man, I don't know if I could really, I need a full-time VA, or I don't know if I have enough work for that, but I'm swamped because this is my side gig and I have to work during the day, whatever the case is. They can literally go in, pick out any service that we have available, and it'll be done for them when they get off.
Wow, that's
Yeah, that'd be cool.
powerful. That
Super excited. I'm super excited about it because I want, like, my goal is to teach people how to make an extra $7,000 to $8,000 a month, right? Because that's life-changing money for most people. That's more
absolutely.
that's average income is $70,000, right? If they could do that and they have their W-2, real estate is a game changer. And if you could scale it slowly and have the systems and processes in place. And the thing about systems and processes is that you don't have to create them. Somebody else already has. You just buy that, right? You take the shortcut. Why do we get coaches? We get coaches because we want the shortcut.
Yep.
Right? So it's the same in every facet, right? You want to, it just depends on how much you want to commit to it. But the number one thing is no matter how the system, how great the system is with VAs, all that stuff, you still got to talk to people. Now, you still got to, in this industry, you still have to talk to really maximize it. Can you get a deal with texting? Absolutely. You know what I mean? You could definitely do that. Can you get a deal with sending offer letters and just waiting for something to come back signed? You could definitely do that. Is it consistent? I don't know if it's consistent. It could be a consistent business.
That's a really good point. I think it bears repeating. If you do not want to talk to people in this business, you might have a little bit of a harder time getting consistent results, right?
Yeah, or partner with somebody that loves talking to people. You can do
There you
that
go.
kind of stuff. That's what I do, right?
Yeah.
I like sales, but I don't love it. I partner with somebody that, man, that's his jam. And he loves
Yeah.
it, right? You could find collaborations
Many different ways to skin the cat, for
in so
sure.
many different ways.
Mike, you mentioned that you really are passionate about helping people to get another 7 to 8K a month from real estate. If someone's listening to this and they're like, "My gosh, that sounds amazing," what could they expect to spend in terms of maybe operational expenses or marketing? What would they have to invest in order to be able to reach that level of 7 to 8K a month?
I think you're probably about looking at least 2,500 a month at least. You
That's
can
good.
you can do it for 2,500 a month, and that's just one cold caller, right? If you add a lead manager or fractional, you can probably be a little bit more than that, but probably you want to start at a place like, hey, listen, 2,500 for 6 months. That's my baseline. And then truthfully, you're gonna make a lot more than 7,000 a month. You're gonna make once you get it going and you stay with it, 7,000 will be the at the very low end of it. But you have to work it to sit there and say that you don't need money. I love hearing people go, hey, you don't need money to do real estate. Part of that is true, but you're not going to scale a business. You're not going to get out of your 9 to 5. There's only so many things you can do. Like you could door knock, you could put out flyers, you could do all that stuff, but that takes time. So if you want to shortcut your life and get to that, save a little bit of money up and then make sure that you have that mental capacity that you're going to get it done. Because truthfully, we're all batting 1,000, right? We've all overcame everything in our life. That's why we're here. It just depends on how bad you want it. That's it.
Yeah, that's really good. So, sounds like you've got a really powerful platform. That product sounds absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to dive into it myself to take a look at it. If someone is listening to this and they're like, listen, I'm more interested in a done for you type thing. Like, I just want leads. I just want warm leads, hot leads so I can talk to. Do you guys offer any type of done for you services like that?
Yeah, man, we offer Lead Max. We started that God, a couple of years ago because we got tired of people saying that, hey, I couldn't do anything with this data. I'm like, all right, so let me take that over for you. And so that's gone really well. And so for we don't sell an agent. So a lot of people will sell you a cold caller, right? What we sell is records. So we for $2,400, it's actually $600 a week. For $600 a week, you get 10 to 12,000 records included with skip tracing, and that's a dialer, that's agents, that's DIDS, the phone numbers, that's quality control, that's everything. And they'll start giving you, we guarantee that you'll have 24 to 50 leads a month on that, right? And then after that, if you don't have a leads manager, we could help you with that. We could add a leads manager, that's another 600. So everything's 600 a week. So it just depends on your budget, right? So for on the prospect side, it's called Lead Max. I'll leave a link for you guys. But the agents, they're next level. You can hear them. They're talking. They talk differently to that person. They talk better than I do because I can barely speak English myself. But they're just amazing. They're amazing because we put a lot of time and effort into it.
I love that. That sounds like a really powerful solution. That's really good. Mike, what would you consider to be your superpower?
I could get people to believe in a vision and all move forward towards that vision. And that's something that I've been able to do pretty much my whole life, being from different industries, different types of people. I think that one of my superpowers is that I can inspire people to come together and go in a direction that's going to benefit everybody. On the short term, it's going to be a sacrifice, but on the long term, everybody wins. And I've been able to consistently do that over and over again.
Love that. What's your definition of success?
I think like most people, I became a virtual investor. Yeah, okay, little story. So I remember when I going to my first mastermind, didn't know much about real estate. And this guy was doing a presentation. He was like, I buy houses off my laptop. I never go on appointments. All this other stuff. He's a friend of mine. His name's Paul Lizelle, and he's a virtual investor. And I was like, man, that is amazing to me. So I changed everything, right? I work out of my house. I'm able to be there when my kids get off of school. I'm a dad first and foremost, husband and dad, and that's super important to me to not miss anything. But still, I'm an entrepreneur. I love building things and striving for something. I'm a striver, right? But I could do it on my time. And so funny, a friend of mine asked me the other day, he said, when are you going to retire? And I was like, dude, I don't know if I'll ever retire. That's not my jam. What am I going to do? I enjoy what I do. I think so. Success is doing what you want to do when you want to do it. And work, man, it doesn't feel like work because I'm building, I'm becoming better, right? I don't like coming on podcasts. I don't like public speaking. I don't like a lot of things. I do it and it makes me stronger from doing it. And then afterwards, you just feel really proud of yourself. I think there's something about, to me, having a goal, achieving it, and it just builds a level of confidence to go, why not me? Why can't I do that? And so that's been a consistent, reoccurring thing for me. And so that's success to me.
Yeah, I love that. Sign me up, brother. I'm all for that. That's my definition as well. We're rolling with
Yeah,
that.
man.
So, do you have any type of like thought leaders or authors, entrepreneurs that you like to follow, listen to, read, that kind of thing?
Everybody else, I like the Hermosies of the world, but I like people that speak about things that are not they're not tied to a monetary circumstance. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a believer, and the older I get, the more I realize that it's not about money. It's really about, especially my kids. They bring me closer to reality. I wasn't a very good dad, I don't think, on my first one because I wasn't present. And so now I like to hear about people that are being present, that are being kind, that live their life with a purpose. Those people inspire me.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
If you could go back and tell yourself three pieces of advice when you were first starting your entrepreneur journey, what would they be?
It's going to take a lot longer than you think. Okay. So let me think. Yes. Cut me off guard. So it's going to take a lot longer than you think. Everything comes in its own time. So I think that comes with the first one because there's a lot of times good things happen to you, but you're not that person to really take advantage of it yet.
Mm,
And so you just got to know that you are evolving into something, right? Let me say, nothing, nobody's opinion matters. There's nobody like it doesn't matter what somebody thinks or where they're at or what's going on. The only thing that matters is your path, right? And the impact that you could have around people. So instead of like when you're in business and you're starting, it's unbelievably stressful because you're often the last person that's paid and you can't help but think of money, right? Because you're surviving, you're in survival mode, right? And sometimes when you're in that mode, you don't make the best decisions and you got to be able to detach and just calm down a little bit. So another advice of me would be, man, I would probably meditate a little bit more. I would probably find a way to slow my mind down more,
mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they are a people pleaser or they really care about other people's opinions, how would you help them through understanding that other people's opinions don't matter?
Other people's opinions don't matter. That's a double-edged sword. So the people that matter, right?
Mm,
So my family matters, my wife's opinion matters. There's people that I allow to have that power with me, right? Like they matter. Because if I did something that upset them, even if whatever, I felt I was right or wrong, it really doesn't matter. That's how they feel. And I gotta find my way through that. But as far as I think it's just ego, like it's your inability to understand who you are. Like you're as powerful, you're unbelievably powerful, you're more powerful than most. You could really like our brain is so amazing. This has happened so many times. Like anything that you really focus on actually happens. It just happens after you do a lot of action and it's never going to be in the time that you want it to happen. But it usually happens, right? More times than not. And I know it's hard when you're going through a tough time to think that. But if you look at your life, like I said, we're all batting 1,000, right? We've all overcome everything. If you look at your life, more times than not, that thing that did not happen that you wanted to happen was the best thing. It sets you up for something better. And you just didn't realize it in that moment, right? So as far as pleasing people, like they have zero impact on your life when it's all said and done, except for the people that are around you. So
yeah. Oh,
that's
that's
the other
so
thing.
good. That is so good. I love that. This topic, by the way, should be a different podcast episode because I could talk about this forever. So we're gonna have to jam about this topic at some point. I love
Absolutely.
this. I love this. So listen, Mike, I want to thank you so much. You've given so much to us today. You've been so generous with your time and your expertise. How can we give back to you right now? What resources or connections are you currently looking for?
I'm not looking for anything, man. If you want to find me, you can find me on Facebook. I'll put some links here as well on if we can serve you or not. If we're just starting this campaign, so if you want to be a part of that beta, we're just rolling out. It's probably going to come out in the first of the year. Love to work with people that I can get feedback from and just make a better product for other people. So that's the only thing I'm looking for.
Excellent. I love that. We'll put all of those links that you've shared in the show notes and in the description. People can reach out to you. Thanks so much, Mike. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to share with us today. I know podcasting is not your favorite, so thank you for doing that for us today. Thank you, Sarah and Jay and Stephen and Carolyn and everyone who has streamed us. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week with another fantastic episode, so keep your eyes open on the Only Land Fans group for that. Until then, take care, be safe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other 6- and 7-figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, Only Land Fans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.